My name is Heather Reynolds, and at 32, I built the life I always wanted as a marketing executive in Chicago. My relationship with my sister Jessica has always been complicated, but last Christmas, she crossed a line that changed everything. She announced I would babysit her 3 kids while she and her husband traveled to Aspen. When I said no, I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. What happened next taught me more about boundaries, family, and myself than I could have imagined. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from, hit that subscribe button, and stick around to see how I handled my sister's holiday ambush. My life in Chicago is exactly what I've worked so hard to achieve. After years of late nights, weekend work sessions, and countless presentations, I was promoted to senior marketing director at one of the city's top advertising firms last October. My downtown apartment has floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the skyline that still takes my breath away, especially at sunset when the buildings light up one by one like stars appearing in the night sky. I've always been independent and organized. My apartment reflects that with its minimalist design, carefully curated artwork, and spotless kitchen that I use to cook elaborate meals when I need to decompress. My calendar is color-coded, my closet is arranged by season and color, and I have a 5-year plan that I review quarterly. Some might call it controlling, but I prefer to think of it as knowing what I want. What I don't want, and have never wanted, are children of my own. This has been a constant point of contention between my sister Jessica and me since we were teenagers. Jessica was always the perfect daughter in our parents' eyes. She married her high school sweetheart Brian right after college, bought a house in the suburbs, and promptly had twins, Emma and Liam, now 7 years old. Little Zoe followed 3 years later and completed their picture-perfect family. Jessica never misses an opportunity to make passive-aggressive comments about my child-free lifestyle choice. "Don't you worry about being alone when you're older?" she'll ask while the kids destroy her living room. Or, "I know your career is important, but nothing compares to the joy of having children," she'll say as Zoe throws a tantrum because her sandwich was cut into squares instead of triangles. These comments are annoying, but they're nothing compared to Jessica's habit of asking for favors at the last minute. It's like she believes her status as a mother grants her special privileges that everyone else should accommodate without question. Last Easter is a perfect example. I drove an hour to their house for our family gathering, bringing homemade appetizers and gifts for the kids. 20 minutes after I arrived, Jessica asked if I could watch the children while she ran a quick errand. 5 hours later, she returned with a new haircut, manicure, and shopping bags. When I mentioned I had plans that evening, she looked genuinely surprised, as if the idea that I might have a life outside of being available for her needs had never occurred to her. Then there was her birthday in September. She called me the night before a critical presentation I had been preparing for weeks, saying she felt so overwhelmed and needed a break. Could I possibly take the day off to watch the kids so she could have a spa day? Despite knowing how important the meeting was, she acted hurt and disappointed when I initially hesitated. I ended up rescheduling the presentation, which didn't exactly impress my boss, and spent the day chasing 3 children around my very non-childproof apartment. Despite the frustration these incidents cause, I always feel obligated to say yes. It's a combination of guilt, family pressure, and the genuine love I have for my nieces and nephew, even if their mother drives me crazy. This Christmas, though, I decided things would be different. For the first time in years, I planned a holiday just for myself. No traveling to my parents' house 2 states away. No awkward conversations about my single status or biological clock. No watching Jessica open expensive gifts from Brian while I received yet another scented candle or generic sweater. Instead, I booked a luxurious spa day for Christmas Eve, complete with massage, facial, and a gourmet lunch. For Christmas Day, I made dinner reservations at an upscale restaurant that had a special holiday menu. The rest of my time would be spent reading books I'd been meaning to get to, watching classic movies, and simply enjoying the peace and quiet. I even decorated my apartment beautifully, just for me. I bought a small but elegant tree and adorned it with silver and blue ornaments. Twinkling lights framed my windows, and I splurged on an expensive holiday-scented candle that filled the space with the aroma of pine and cinnamon. It was perfect, sophisticated and peaceful, exactly how I wanted to spend my holiday. Everything was set for the Christmas I had always wanted but never allowed myself to have. Then, 3 days before Christmas, my phone rang with Jessica's name on the screen. "Hey, Heather. How's my favorite sister?" Jessica's overly cheerful voice came through the phone. I immediately tensed. This tone meant she wanted something. "I'm your only sister," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "What's up?" "Oh, not much," she said casually. "The kids are so excited for Christmas. Emma lost another tooth yesterday, and Liam got the lead in the school play." "Oh, and Zoe." "Jessica," I interrupted gently. "Is there something specific you needed? I'm in the middle of finishing up a project before the holiday break." "Well," she dragged out the word. "Brian's parents gave us an amazing Christmas gift. All expenses paid trip to Aspen for a week. Can you believe it? We leave on Christmas Eve." I waited for the rest, but she was silent as if what she'd said explained everything. "That's nice," I said cautiously. "I'm sure you'll have a great time." "Oh, we will," Jessica gushed. "The resort has a spa, and there's skiing, and romantic dinners. It's going to be perfect." "So, you'll babysit the kids while we travel, right?" "We'll drop them off on Christmas Eve morning." It wasn't even a question. She stated it as if it were a foregone conclusion, as if my agreement was so certain it didn't require asking. "Wait, what?" I said, feeling my heart rate accelerate. "Jessica, I can't watch the kids for a week." "Why not?" she asked, genuinely sounding confused. "You're not coming to Mom and Dad's, right? So you'll be alone anyway." "I have plans," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've made reservations and arrangements. I've been looking forward to this Christmas for months." Jessica laughed dismissively. "What plans could be more important than spending time with your nieces and nephew? Come on, Heather. The tickets are non-refundable. Brian's parents spent a fortune on this." Something inside me snapped. Years of giving in, of rearranging my life to accommodate Jessica's demands without notice or gratitude, culminated in that moment. "No," I said firmly. "I'm sorry, but I can't do it. You should have asked me before accepting the gift. My plans are important to me, and I've already paid for everything." The line went silent for a moment. When Jessica spoke again, her voice had changed completely. "I can't believe you're being so selfish," she said coldly. "They're your family, Heather. What kind of aunt refuses to spend Christmas with her own nieces and nephew?" "This isn't about the kids," I explained, feeling my resolve weakening under the weight of her accusation. "I love them. But this is about you assuming I would drop everything without even asking me first." "Mom will be so disappointed," Jessica continued, ignoring my explanation entirely. "She always says you prioritize your career over family." I defended you, but I guess she was right all along. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost laughable, but it still hurt. Our mother had indeed made comments like that over the years, usually after I missed some family event due to work commitments. The fact that Jessica would use it against me now felt like a low blow. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded despite the anger and hurt swirling inside me. "But my answer is still no. You'll need to find another solution." "Fine," Jessica snapped. "I'll tell everyone how you ruined our Christmas. Don't expect any sympathy when you're alone and miserable on the holidays because you pushed your family away." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, a mixture of emotions washing over me. Guilt, of course, Jessica was an expert at inducing that. But underneath it was something else, pride. For once, I had stood up for myself. I had set a boundary and held it, despite the pressure and manipulation. That feeling didn't last long. Within minutes, my phone began buzzing with text messages. "Jessica, you're being ridiculous. Just say yes and stop making this difficult. Jessica, the kids were so excited to stay with you. Now I have to tell them their aunt doesn't want them around. Jessica. Brian says you're being incredibly selfish. I turned off notifications and put my phone away. I needed space to process what had happened without Jessica's voice in my head. But less than an hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. Heather, she began without greeting, what's this I hear about you refusing to help your sister? She and Brian haven't had a vacation in years, and you know how hard they work with those children. I took a deep breath. Mom, Jessica didn't ask me if I could watch the kids. She told me I would be doing it, without any consideration for my own plans. What plans could be more important than family? My mother echoed Jessica's words exactly. I wondered if they'd rehearsed this. That's not the point, I tried to explain. The point is that Jessica assumes my time is less valuable than hers because I don't have children. It's not fair, and I'm tired of it. Life isn't fair, Heather, my mother sighed, using her familiar refrain from our childhood. Sometimes we make sacrifices for the people we love. Why is it always me making the sacrifices? I asked, hearing the edge in my voice. Why doesn't Jessica ever have to accommodate my needs or respect my time? Because she has children, my mother said, as if this explained everything. You'll understand someday if you ever have your own. It was pointless. In their eyes, my life without children meant I had nothing of importance to do, no valid claims on my own time. After promising to think about it, I ended the call and turned my phone off completely. I needed peace, and I wasn't going to get it with my family continuing to pressure me. Despite the unpleasantness, I felt strangely liberated. For years, I had given in to these exact tactics, the guilt, the family pressure, the implication that my time and plans were inherently less important. Standing firm, even in the face of disapproval, felt right. I went to sleep that night determined to enjoy the Christmas I had planned for myself, regardless of what my family thought. Christmas Eve morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight reflecting off the fresh snow that had fallen overnight. From my bedroom window, Chicago looked like a holiday postcard, the city transformed into a winter wonderland. I smiled as I padded to the kitchen to make coffee, excited for the day ahead. My spa appointment wasn't until noon, so I had a leisurely morning planned. I was going to make my favorite breakfast, finish wrapping the small gifts I'd bought for myself, a tradition I started years ago, and maybe watch a holiday movie before heading out. As I sipped my coffee, I felt a sense of accomplishment wash over me. For once, I had prioritized my own needs and set a clear boundary with my family. Yes, there had been unpleasantness, but I had survived it. The world hadn't ended because I said no to Jessica. The doorbell rang, interrupting my peaceful morning. Probably a package delivery, I thought, setting down my coffee mug. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the doorman usually called up before sending visitors to my floor. I opened the door without checking the peephole, a mistake I would soon regret. There stood Jessica, Brian, and their 3 children, surrounded by an alarming amount of luggage. The twins, Emma and Liam, were bouncing with excitement, while little Zoe clutched her favorite stuffed unicorn, looking sleepy. Aunt Heather, the twins shouted in unison, trying to push past me into the apartment. I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process what was happening. Jessica's smug expression told me everything I needed to know. This was no misunderstanding, this was a deliberate ambush. What are you doing here? I finally managed to ask, still blocking the entrance to my apartment. We told you, Jessica said, as if I were being particularly dense. We're heading to Aspen. Our flight leaves in 3 hours, so we need to get going soon. Brian, at least, had the decency to look uncomfortable. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, avoiding eye contact. I told you I couldn't watch the kids, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. We discussed this. I said no. Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, come on, Heather. We both know you were just being difficult. Now move aside, we'll be late for our flight. She tried to push past me, steering Zoe by the shoulders. I stood my ground, blocking the doorway more firmly. No, Jessica. This is not happening. I made plans. I have reservations. I'm not dropping everything because you decided to ignore what I told you. By now, my neighbor's doors were cracking open. Mrs. Abernathy from across the hall peered out curiously. The young couple from 14B slowed their walk toward the elevator, obviously intrigued by the drama unfolding. "You're making a scene," Jessica hissed, noticing the onlookers. "I'm making a scene?" I whispered incredulously. "You showed up at my door unannounced with 3 children after I explicitly told you I couldn't watch them. You're the one making a scene." The twins had stopped bouncing and were now looking between their mother and me with growing concern. Zoe, sensing the tension, clutched her unicorn tighter and moved closer to Brian. "Fine," Jessica said, her voice dangerously calm. "Kids, say goodbye to your father and me. Apparently, Aunt Heather doesn't want you in her apartment, so you'll have to stay in the hallway until we get back from Aspen." "Jessica." I gasped, shocked at the manipulation. "What?" she asked innocently. "You won't let them in, and we have a plane to catch. What else are we supposed to do?" The children's eyes widened in alarm. Zoe's lip began to tremble. Even the twins looked scared now. "You wouldn't let your nieces and nephews spend Christmas alone in a hallway, would you?" Jessica pressed, knowing she had me cornered. Mrs. Abernathy was now fully watching from her doorway, arms crossed disapprovingly. The couple by the elevator were whispering to each other. I felt trapped, embarrassed, and furious all at once. Jessica had calculated everything perfectly. She knew I would never allow the children to be abandoned, especially not in front of an audience. She knew that by creating this public spectacle, she was forcing my hand. And worst of all, she knew she would get away with it because she always did. The look of triumph in her eyes as I stepped aside to let them enter was almost unbearable. The moment they crossed the threshold, chaos erupted. The twins ran straight for my living room, jumping onto my pristine white couch with their snow-covered boots. Zoe, suddenly energized, began examining every object within reach, her small fingers leaving smudges on my carefully cleaned glass coffee table. "Kids, behave at Aunt Heather's," Jessica called out half-heartedly as she wheeled their suitcases into my entryway. She began rattling off instructions at lightning speed. "Emma needs her allergy medication twice a day, but only if she's been outside. Liam won't eat anything green, and Zoe has to have her unicorn to sleep, or she'll scream all night. Bedtime is 8 for Zoe, 9 for the twins, except on weekends when they can stay up until 9:30. Baths every other day. No more than 2 hours of screen time. Oh, and Liam has a school project due when he gets back, so make sure he works on that." She thrust a folder at me filled with schedules, emergency contacts, and what appeared to be a rudimentary meal plan consisting mostly of chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. "I didn't buy any of that food," I said, still trying to process what was happening. Jessica waved dismissively. "There's a grocery store down the block, right? You'll figure it out." Brian was unloading more bags, smaller ones filled with presents. "These are from Santa," he whispered. "They're already wrapped, just put them out Christmas morning." At least they had thought of that. Still, I felt increasingly overwhelmed as I surveyed the mountain of luggage now filling my entryway. There were suitcases, backpacks, a bag apparently dedicated entirely to stuffed animals, and another containing what looked like every electronic device the family owned. "How long did you say you'd be gone?" I asked faintly. "Just a week," Jessica replied, checking her watch impatiently. "We'll be back on New Year's Eve, probably late." A week. 7 full days of caring for 3 children I loved but barely knew how to handle. 7 days of cancelled plans, disrupted routines, and complete chaos in my carefully ordered life. "Jessica, I don't even have proper sleeping arrangements for them," I pointed out, desperately searching for a reason that might make her reconsider this insanity. "They can sleep in your bed," she replied. "You have a pull-out couch, right? Or air mattresses? Whatever, they're adaptable." From the living room came the sound of something falling. We all turned to see one of my art books on the floor, its pages bent. Liam looked guilty. "Sorry, Aunt Heather," he mumbled. Before I could respond, Jessica was checking her watch again. "We really need to go. Traffic to O'Hare will be a nightmare." She knelt quickly to give each child a hurried hug and kiss. "Be good for Aunt Heather. We'll bring you back something nice from Aspen." Brian followed suit, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the situation but saying nothing to stop it. He gave me an apologetic glance as Jessica practically dragged him toward the door. "Thanks so much, sis. You're a lifesaver," Jessica called over her shoulder. "Everything they need should be in the bags. Call if there's an emergency, but remember the time difference." And just like that, they were gone, the door closing behind them with what felt like ominous finality. For a moment, there was silence as the children realized their parents had left. Then, as if on cue, Zoe's face crumpled, and she let out a wail that probably violated my building's noise ordinances. "Mommy," she screamed, running to the door and trying to open it with her small hands. "I want Mommy." I rushed to comfort her, kneeling to her level, but she was inconsolable. Meanwhile, the twins had discovered my television remote and were arguing loudly over what to watch. "I want cartoons," Emma insisted. "No, I want to watch the Christmas movie," Liam countered, trying to wrestle the remote from his sister's grip. I managed to pick up the sobbing Zoe, who immediately went rigid in my arms, screaming louder. "Put me down. I want Mommy. I don't like it here." My beautiful, peaceful apartment had transformed into a war zone in less than 5 minutes. As I looked around at my white couch now marked with dirty boot prints, my coffee table covered in fingerprints, and my carefully decorated Christmas tree that the twins were now eyeing with dangerous curiosity, I felt a wave of resentment so powerful it nearly took my breath away. This was supposed to be my Christmas. My time. My celebration on my terms. Now it was ruined, and for what? So Jessica and Brian could have a romantic getaway without considering anyone else's plans or feelings? I set Zoe down as gently as possible given her thrashing, and she immediately ran to the window, pressing her face against the glass as if she might spot her parents on the street below. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out my phone to call Jessica, only to realize with mounting horror that I would now have to cancel all my carefully made plans. The spa day I'd been looking forward to for weeks. The dinner reservation at the restaurant that had a 3-month waiting list. All of it, gone. I called the spa first, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation while the sounds of children arguing provided chaotic background noise. "I'm so sorry," the receptionist said, not sounding sorry at all. "Since it's less than 24 hours notice, we'll have to charge the full amount." The restaurant was equally unsympathetic. Another non-refundable charge to add to the growing list of things Jessica now owed me, not that she would ever acknowledge it. Next, I needed to figure out what supplies we actually had versus what we needed. A quick inventory of the bags revealed that Jessica had packed plenty of toys and electronics but had somehow forgotten essentials like toothbrushes, shampoo appropriate for children, and enough changes of clothes for a week-long stay. Zoe was still crying by the window, though the volume had decreased somewhat. The twins had settled on a compromised TV show but were now complaining they were hungry. "Aunt Heather, do you have any snacks?" Emma asked, looking at me expectantly. My refrigerator contained kale, kombucha, and the ingredients for the gourmet meals I had planned to cook for myself. Nothing remotely appealing to children accustomed to chicken nuggets and juice boxes. "We need to go shopping," I announced, trying to sound more cheerful than I felt. "Get your coats back on." This suggestion was met with groans and protests. "But we just got here," Liam complained. "I'm tired," Emma whined. "I want Mommy." Zoe renewed her crying with impressive lung capacity. Somehow, through a combination of bribery, "we'll get ice cream," threats, "no electronics for the rest of the day," and sheer desperation, I managed to bundle all 3 children back into their winter gear and out the door. The emergency shopping trip was a nightmare of epic proportions. Zoe had a complete meltdown in the middle of the toothpaste aisle. Emma and Liam couldn't agree on cereal, resulting in my buying 3 different kinds to avoid another public scene. By the time we reached the checkout with a cart full of kid-friendly food, basic toiletries, and a few emergency toys, I was sweating despite the winter chill. The total made me wince. Another expense to add to Jessica's tab, which I was now keeping track of meticulously. Back at the apartment, I discovered yet another oversight. Jessica had forgotten to pack Liam's special pillow, without which, according to Emma, he gets super bad nightmares and wakes up screaming. Perfect. Just perfect. As I attempted to prepare a dinner that would satisfy 3 picky eaters while Zoe clung to my leg crying and the twins argued over which Christmas movie to watch first, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. My perfect Christmas had been hijacked, my plans destroyed, my peaceful retreat transformed into a chaotic daycare center. And the worst part? This was only the first few hours. We still had an entire week to go. Getting the children to sleep that night was an exercise in patience I wasn't sure I possessed. My apartment, designed for a single adult with minimal needs, was woefully unprepared for bedtime routines involving 3 small children. The sleeping arrangements were the first major hurdle. I reluctantly surrendered my bedroom to the kids, setting up Emma and Zoe in my queen-sized bed while making a pallet on the floor for Liam using every spare blanket and pillow I owned. He was not thrilled with this solution. But I always sleep in a real bed, he protested, poking at the makeshift bed suspiciously. Think of it like camping, I suggested, trying to inject some enthusiasm into my voice despite my exhaustion. I hate camping, he replied flatly. Meanwhile, Zoe was having none of it. Every time I thought she was settling down, she would bolt upright and start crying for her mother again. The unfamiliar surroundings only heightened her distress. I want my room. I want my bed. I want Mommy to sing the goodnight song, she wailed, clutching her unicorn so tightly I feared for the stuffed animal's structural integrity. Emma, the most adaptable of the 3, was at least trying to be helpful. Mom always reads us 3 stories, then sings the special song, then does monster spray around the room, she informed me, as if this were common knowledge. Monster spray? I asked wearily. To keep the monsters away, she explained with the patience of someone dealing with a particularly slow student. You mix water with special monster-fighting powers in a spray bottle. I didn't have a spray bottle. I didn't know the special song. And the only children's book in my entire apartment was a copy of Where the Wild Things Are that I'd kept from my own childhood. After reading it 3 times, making up 2 more stories on the spot, and improvising a monster spray using my expensive facial toner in a repurposed perfume atomizer, Zoe was still wide awake and intermittently crying. It was nearly midnight when all 3 finally fell asleep, Emma and Zoe in my bed, Liam on his floor pallet, and me on my living room couch, which was not designed for sleeping. Every time I shifted, it made a creaking sound that threatened to wake the children, so I lay rigid, staring at the ceiling, mentally calculating how many hours of sleep I might get before they woke up. The answer, as it turned out, was 4. At precisely 4:17 a.m., according to my phone, Zoe appeared beside the couch, her small face inches from mine in the darkness. I had an accident, she whispered. My mattress. My expensive, memory foam mattress with the organic cotton cover I'd splurged on as a promotion gift to myself. I closed my eyes briefly, summoning patience from reserves I didn't know I had. It's okay, sweetie. Accidents happen. Let's get you cleaned up. An hour later, after stripping the bed, scrubbing the mattress as best I could, remaking it with my only other set of sheets, and getting Zoe into clean pajamas, thankfully, Jessica had packed extras, I was even more exhausted but no closer to additional sleep. Because now it was 5:30 a.m. on Christmas morning, and the twins were awake and remembering what day it was. Christmas, they shouted in unison, fully energized despite the late night. Santa came. Except, of course, Santa hadn't come. Not to my apartment. Because Santa had no idea the children would be here. The presents Brian had unloaded were meant for their home in the suburbs, not my downtown apartment. The realization hit all three children simultaneously as they raced to my living room and found no presents under my small, elegantly decorated tree. "Where are the presents?" Liam asked, his voice small and confused. "Santa didn't find us," Emma whispered, looking heartbroken. Zoe's lower lip began to tremble ominously. "Did Santa forget us? Are we on the naughty list?" I wanted to strangle Jessica and Brian in that moment. How had they not thought of this? How had they not prepared for Christmas morning in a different location? No, I assured them quickly. Santa would never forget you. He must have left your presents at home, knowing you'd be back there soon. And I'm sure he left some small things here too, but they might be hidden. The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them, and suddenly 3 pairs of eyes were looking at me with renewed hope. "A treasure hunt!" Emma exclaimed excitedly. "Santa hid our presents." What had I done? Now I needed to produce presents, and fast. While the kids were distracted searching the apartment for non-existent hidden gifts, I retreated to my bedroom, frantically searching online for stores that might be open on Christmas morning. Nothing. Not even the convenience store on the corner opened until noon. In desperation, I began searching my apartment for anything that could be repurposed as a child's gift. A scarf I'd never worn. A set of colored pens from my office. A chocolate bar I'd been saving for a special occasion. It was pathetic, but it was all I had. I wrapped these meager offerings in pages torn from a magazine, hiding them in increasingly obvious places around the apartment while directing the children's search with hints. "Oh, I think I see something poking out from behind the TV stand. Maybe check under the kitchen table again?" Their initial excitement at finding these hidden treasures quickly gave way to confusion and disappointment. "This is just a scarf," Emma said, trying but failing to hide her disappointment. "I don't want pens," Liam complained. "I asked Santa for a new video game." Zoe burst into tears at the chocolate bar. "I wanted a new dolly." By 8 a.m. on Christmas morning, all three children were in various states of distress. My apartment was a disaster zone, and I was fighting back tears of frustration and exhaustion. When my phone rang, I lunged for it, hoping against hope that it was Jessica calling to say this had all been a terrible mistake and they were coming back. Instead, it was my mother. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. How are the kids?" So Jessica had told them. Of course she had. Here, I managed, stepping into my bathroom and closing the door for a moment of privacy. "Mom, did you know Jessica was going to do this?" After I specifically told her no? "Well," my mother hedged, "she mentioned you were being a bit difficult about the whole thing. But I'm sure you're having a wonderful time now, aren't you? Children make Christmas so special." I closed my eyes, leaning against the door. "Mom, they're miserable. There were no presents this morning because Jessica didn't think to bring any. I had no food they would eat. My apartment isn't set up for children. And I had plans that I had to cancel, losing hundreds of dollars in non-refundable deposits." "Oh, Heather," my mother sighed, "you're always so dramatic. They're just children. And it's Christmas. Make the best of it. Make the best of it." As if I hadn't been trying to do exactly that for the past 18 hours. After ending the call, I tried calling Jessica directly. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Brian. Same result. With growing horror, I realized they had turned off their phones. They were completely unreachable. I was on my own, trapped in a nightmare of Jessica's creation with no way out. The magnitude of her selfishness hit me fully then. She hadn't just inconvenienced me, she had abandoned her children on Christmas without proper preparation, all for a vacation she could have planned better. As I emerged from the bathroom to find Zoe had used my lipstick to decorate the white walls of my hallway, I reached my breaking point. Tears of frustration welled in my eyes. This was, without question, the worst Christmas of my life. A knock at my door interrupted my spiral into despair. Wiping away tears, I opened it to find Megan, my neighbor from 2 doors down. We weren't close friends, but we'd chatted in the elevator occasionally. "Merry Christmas," she said brightly, then faltered as she took in my disheveled appearance and the sounds of children arguing in the background. "I heard some commotion this morning and thought I'd check if everything's okay." "My sister dumped her 3 kids on me without warning," I explained, too exhausted for pretense. After I explicitly told her I couldn't watch them. Now I have 3 disappointed children on Christmas morning with hardly any presents, no proper food, and I'm completely unprepared. Instead of the awkward retreat I expected, Megan's face lit up with understanding. "Oh my gosh, that's terrible. Listen, I'm hosting Christmas dinner for some friends and family today. Nothing fancy, just a potluck. Why don't you and the kids join us? There will be other children there, and plenty of food." I hesitated, reluctant to impose on someone else's holiday. Megan seemed to sense my reservation. "Seriously, the more the merrier. And I have a niece and nephew about their age who brought a ton of games and toys. It might help salvage their Christmas." The kindness of this near stranger broke through my last defenses. "That would be amazing," I admitted. "But I don't have anything to bring, and I can't leave to go shopping." "Don't worry about it," Megan waved dismissively. "Just bring yourselves. Dinner's at 3, but come whenever you're ready." Apartment 14D. After she left, I turned to find all 3 children staring at me with curious expressions. "Who was that?" Emma asked. "That was my neighbor Megan," I explained. "She's invited us to Christmas dinner with her family. There will be other kids there to play with." This news was met with cautious enthusiasm, especially when I mentioned the potential for toys and games. For the first time since they'd arrived, the children seemed genuinely excited about something. The next few hours were spent making ourselves presentable. I helped Zoe wash the tear stains from her face and fixed Emma's hair, which had become impressively tangled overnight. Liam initially resisted changing out of his pajamas but relented when I pointed out that other kids would be there. At 2:30, we made our way down the hall to Megan's apartment. I felt nervous, like I was bringing chaos into someone else's peaceful holiday. But the moment Megan opened her door, those fears began to dissipate. Her apartment was warm, filled with delicious smells and the sound of laughter. Christmas music played softly in the background, and her tree, much larger and more traditionally decorated than mine, dominated the living room, surrounded by a small mountain of presents. Come in," she greeted us warmly, ushering the children inside. "Kids, the others are playing in the den. It's right through there." As predicted, the presence of other children and new toys worked magic. Within minutes, Emma and Liam were engaged in an elaborate game with Megan's niece and nephew, while Zoe was being doted on by Megan's mother, who apparently specialized in charming shy toddlers. I sank onto a couch, accepting the glass of wine Megan offered with pathetic gratitude. "Thank you for this," I said quietly. "You have no idea what a nightmare the last 24 hours have been." "I can imagine," Megan replied sympathetically. "My sister pulled something similar a few years ago. Not quite as extreme, but in the same ballpark. Family, right?" As the afternoon progressed, I found myself relaxing for the first time since Jessica had appeared at my door. The food was delicious, the company welcoming, and most importantly, the children were happy. When Megan's brother produced a few extra gifts they had on hand just in case, small toys and books that delighted my nieces and nephew, I nearly cried with gratitude. While the children played after dinner, I sat at Megan's kitchen island, sipping coffee and watching them through the doorway. Something about the distance gave me perspective I'd been lacking in the chaos of the past day. Yes, Jessica had behaved terribly. Yes, my Christmas plans had been ruined. But the children were innocent in all this. They hadn't asked to be dropped off at their aunt's apartment with minimal preparation. They were just kids, confused and disappointed, trying to make sense of an unexpected situation. And despite everything, I loved them. Emma's curiosity and helpfulness. Liam's imagination and energy. Zoe's sweet nature beneath the tears. They were wonderful children, even if their mother drove me to the brink of sanity. Penny for your thoughts? Megan asked, joining me at the island. I'm just realizing that I've been so focused on how my sister wronged me that I haven't really been present with the kids, I admitted. They're actually pretty great when they're not crying or destroying my apartment. Megan laughed. Children are like that. Absolute terrors 1 minute, completely endearing the next. It's psychological warfare. Later that evening, as I tucked the now exhausted children into their makeshift beds, I felt a shift in my approach. Instead of seeing the next 6 days as a sentence to be endured, I began to view it as an opportunity to connect with my nieces and nephew in a way I never had before. Did you have fun today? I asked as I pulled the covers over Emma. She nodded sleepily. It was different than Christmas at home, but it was good. I liked Megan's niece. She has the same doll I do. Aunt Heather? Liam called from his pallet. Can we do something fun tomorrow too? Definitely, I promised. I know some great places in the city for kids. We'll make a plan in the morning. Even Zoe, who had been so distressed the night before, seemed more settled. Night-night, Aunt Heather, she murmured, clutching her unicorn. Back in the living room, I took out my phone and began researching child-friendly activities in Chicago during the holidays. The city transformed into a winter wonderland this time of year, with ice skating at Millennium Park, the Christmas displays at the Museum of Science and Industry, and the Lincoln Park Zoo's holiday light show. I also started a detailed list of all expenses, the canceled reservations, the emergency shopping trips, the supplies I'd need for the coming week. Jessica would be receiving a very thorough accounting when she returned. But alongside this practical planning, I also began documenting our time together in a different way. I took photos of the kids sleeping peacefully, their faces relaxed and innocent. I made notes about their preferences, their little quirks and habits that I'd never had the opportunity to observe before. The next morning, instead of the chaos of the previous day, we established a routine. Breakfast first, then getting dressed, then an outing. We visited the Lincoln Park Zoo, where the children marveled at the holiday lights and the animals braving the winter chill. I took dozens of photos of them pointing excitedly at snow monkeys and polar bears. The day after, we went ice skating at Millennium Park. I held Zoe's hands as she tentatively shuffled across the ice, her face a mixture of terror and delight. Emma took to it naturally, gliding with surprising grace after just a few minutes of practice. Liam fell repeatedly but got up each time with determined enthusiasm. By the 4th day, we had settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings were for outings, museums, parks, or holiday displays. Afternoons were quieter, spent baking cookies, watching movies, or working on crafts I'd purchased during one of our shopping trips. Evenings were for board games or reading stories before bed. I was exhausted, certainly. 3 children required constant attention, endless patience, and more energy than I typically expended in a week at work. But I was also experiencing a connection with them I'd never had before. Away from their parents and the usual dynamics of family gatherings, I was getting to know them as individuals. Emma, it turned out, had a passion for art and spent hours with the sketchbook and colored pencils I'd bought her. Liam was fascinated by architecture and could identify buildings in the Chicago skyline with impressive accuracy. And Zoe, once she felt secure, revealed a mischievous sense of humor that frequently had us all laughing. Throughout it all, I continued documenting everything, the activities, the expenses, the children's behavior. I consulted with my friend Marissa, a family lawyer, who informed me that what Jessica had done could potentially be considered abandonment under certain circumstances. I'm not saying you should pursue that, she cautioned during our phone call. But you should definitely keep records of everything. Dates, times, the fact that they're unreachable. Take photos of the kids each day, save receipts, document any communications. I wasn't planning to take legal action against my sister, but the knowledge that her behavior crossed legal lines as well as moral ones strengthened my resolve. This would never happen again. When Jessica returned, we would be establishing very clear boundaries, and there would be consequences if she violated them. As New Year's Eve approached, the day Jessica and Brian were due to return, I found myself with surprisingly mixed feelings. Part of me was desperate to return to my normal life, my peaceful routine, my uninterrupted sleep. But another part had grown attached to our improvised little family unit and the connections we'd formed. On our last full day together, I took the kids to Navy Pier, where we rode the Ferris wheel and ate overpriced cotton candy. As we stood watching the frozen lake, Zoe slipped her small hand into mine unprompted, something she'd never done before. "I like staying with you, Aunt Heather," she said simply. Despite everything, despite the chaos and expense and complete disruption of my life, I felt a warmth spread through my chest at her words. "I like having you here too, Zoe," I replied honestly. That night, as all 3 children slept peacefully in their now familiar spots in my bedroom, I finalized my preparation for Jessica's return. The itemized list of expenses was printed and waiting. The photos and documentation were organized. And most importantly, I had practiced exactly what I would say when she walked through my door, expecting gratitude and finding something very different instead. New Year's Eve arrived with a fresh snowfall that blanketed the city in white. The children and I spent the morning making snowmen on my building's rooftop terrace, their laughter carrying across the winter air as they rolled increasingly large snowballs and debated the perfect accessories for their creations. By afternoon, the apartment was tidied, as much as possible with 3 children in residence, bags were mostly packed, and a strange sense of anticipation hung in the air. Jessica had texted that morning, her first communication since abandoning her children a week ago, to say they'd be arriving around 4. At precisely 4:17 p.m., the doorbell rang. Emma and Liam raced to answer it, while Zoe, who had been napping, stumbled sleepily behind them. "Mommy! Daddy!" the twins chorused as Jessica and Brian entered, tanned and relaxed from their week in Aspen. "Hello, my darlings!" Jessica exclaimed, kneeling to embrace them. "Did you have fun with Aunt Heather? Were you good?" Brian at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable as he hugged each child, his eyes meeting mine over their heads with a hint of apology. "We went ice skating," Liam announced excitedly. "And to the zoo, and Navy Pier, and the Science Museum," Emma added. "And we made cookies and snowmen and Aunt Heather taught me how to braid hair," Zoe chimed in, fully awake now and joining the reunion. Jessica looked up at me with a smile that contained not a hint of remorse or recognition of what she had done. "Sounds like you all had a blast." "See, Heather? I knew it would work out fine." I took a deep breath, centering myself. I had practiced this moment, rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm and composed. "Jessica, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" I asked, my voice steady. "Brian, would you mind getting the kids' things together? Most of it is packed, but there are still some toys in the living room." Jessica followed me into the kitchen, her expression curious but unconcerned. I gestured for her to sit at the island while I retrieved the folder I had prepared. "What's this?" she asked as I placed it in front of her. "This is an itemized list of all the expenses I incurred during the week you abandoned your children at my apartment after I explicitly told you I couldn't watch them," I explained calmly. Her eyes widened. "Abandoned? That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" "They were with their aunt." "Their aunt who had said no," I reminded her. "Their aunt who had plans, who wasn't prepared for 3 children, whose apartment wasn't childproofed. And most importantly, their aunt who couldn't reach either parent for the entire week because you turned off your phones." "We didn't turn them off," Jessica protested. "We just had them on airplane mode most of the time." "It was a vacation, Heather." "It was abandonment, Jessica," I replied firmly. "I spoke with a family lawyer friend. What you did could potentially have legal consequences." That got her attention. Her casual demeanor vanished, replaced by alarm. "Legal consequences? Are you threatening me?" "I'm not threatening anything," I assured her. "I'm simply letting you know how serious what you did was. You left your children with no warning, after being told no, with inadequate supplies, and made yourself unreachable. That's abandonment by legal definition." Jessica's face paled slightly. We didn't think of it that way. Clearly, I agreed. Now, about the expenses. I opened the folder and began reviewing the list. Cancelled reservations, $350. Emergency supplies including food, toiletries, and appropriate winter clothing items you forgot to pack, $478.92. Activities and outings to ensure your children had a good Christmas despite being dumped without warning, $629.50. Total, $1,458.42. Jessica stared at the figures in shock. You expect us to pay this? Every penny, I confirmed. And that doesn't include compensation for my time, the damage to my apartment, or the emotional stress of having my holiday completely derailed. I'm only asking for the actual expenses I incurred. This is ridiculous, she sputtered. We can't afford this right now. Then you should have thought of that before booking a luxury ski vacation and assuming I would watch your children for free, I replied evenly. I've set up a payment plan option. I flipped to the next page, which outlined monthly payments. Jessica's indignation was building, her face flushing with anger. I can't believe you're being so petty about this. They're your nieces and nephew. Yes, they are, I agreed. And I love them very much. We had a wonderful week together once we got past the initial trauma of being abandoned by their parents on Christmas Eve. But that doesn't change the fact that what you did was wrong, Jessica. On every level. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I documented. This was Christmas morning, when they realized Santa hadn't found them. 3 sad faces stared back from the screen. This was Zoe crying herself to sleep the first night. Another swipe. This was the wall she decorated with my lipstick because she was upset and unsupervised for the 2 minutes I was in the bathroom. Jessica's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the photos. I didn't think. No, you didn't, I agreed, softening slightly. You didn't think about your children's feelings or needs. You didn't think about the position you were putting me in. You just assumed your plans were more important than anyone else's, as usual. From the living room, I could hear Brian engaging with the children, asking about their week, exclaiming over the drawings Emma was showing him. At least he seemed genuinely interested in their experience. I'm sorry, Jessica finally whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. I was so excited about the trip, and when you said no, I didn't know what else to do. You could have asked someone else, I suggested. You could have brought the kids with you. You could have planned better and asked me months ago instead of days before. There were many options that didn't involve ambushing me and traumatizing your children. Jessica nodded slowly, wiping away tears. You're right. I was selfish. And thoughtless. Her admission surprised me. In all our years of conflict, I couldn't remember Jessica ever acknowledging she was wrong. The kids seem like they had a good time with you, she added quietly. Better than I would have expected, honestly. They're amazing children, I told her sincerely. Smart, funny, resilient. We had a rough start, but we figured it out. That doesn't excuse what you did, though. No, it doesn't, she agreed. To my further surprise, she picked up the expense sheet and folded it carefully, tucking it into her purse. We'll pay this back. All of it. And I promise this won't happen again. Brian appeared in the kitchen doorway, a bag in each hand. Everything's packed up, he announced, glancing between us and clearly sensing the tension. Jess, we should probably get going. The kids are tired, and we still need to pick up Rover from the kennel. As they prepared to leave, the children insisted on giving me proper goodbyes. Emma had made me a drawing of all of us ice skating. Liam promised to send me pictures of a building project he was working on. And Zoe, sweet Zoe who had cried for her mother that first night, gave me the tightest hug her small arms could manage. Visit soon, Aunt Heather, she insisted. We can make more cookies. I will, I promised, surprised by the emotion tightening my throat. At the door, Jessica paused. "Thank you," she said softly. "Despite everything, thank you for taking care of him." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without my voice breaking. After they left, my apartment felt strangely empty. The silence I had craved for days now seemed hollow. I wandered through the rooms, picking up small reminders of the children's presence: a forgotten hair ribbon, a crayon that had rolled under the couch, a small sock that had somehow ended up behind the TV. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. Jessica began sending regular updates about the children, sharing their achievements and funny stories. She asked my advice about Emma's interest in art classes and whether I thought Liam would enjoy an architecture book she'd found. Most surprisingly, she suggested a standing arrangement: 1 weekend a month, the children would stay with me, planned in advance, with proper preparation, and with their parents reachable at all times. "They miss you," she explained during one of our now regular phone calls. "And I think it's good for them to have a relationship with you that isn't just filtered through Brian and me." Our first planned weekend together was in February. Jessica arrived on time, with neatly packed bags, detailed instructions, and children who were excited rather than confused. "We'll have our phones on the whole time," she assured me. "Call for anything, no matter how small." As I watched her drive away, Zoe's small hand in mine and the twins already racing toward the elevator, I reflected on how much had changed since that Christmas ambush. Jessica and I were building a new relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than resentment and obligation. I was developing genuine connections with my nieces and nephew, learning their personalities and becoming a real presence in their lives rather than just the aunt they saw at holidays. And I had discovered something about myself too. While I still valued my independence and had no desire for children of my own, I found joy in being part of these children's lives on my own terms. The boundaries I had fought so hard to establish had actually made it possible for me to be more present, more engaged, and more loving when I was with them. The greatest lesson of that chaotic Christmas wasn't that boundaries don't matter. It was that true boundaries, when properly established and respected, create space for healthier, more authentic relationships to flourish. As we settled into our weekend routine, hot chocolate first, then a trip to the art museum Emma had been eager to visit, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected. This was what family could be when built on respect rather than obligation. This was what love looked like when it had room to breathe. Have you ever had a family member who completely disregarded your boundaries? How did you handle it? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story of holiday chaos turned family transformation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on setting boundaries with family while still maintaining loving relationships. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, sometimes the strongest families are built on the clearest boundaries.